Have you ever stopped to wonder if everything you've been taught about faith, about the very foundation of Christianity, might not be the whole story? Imagine, just for a moment, that one of the most sacred and unquestioned beliefs of the last 2,000 years carries within it a secret, one that could completely transform the way you see Jesus, Mary, and even your own connection to the divine. This is not a light question, and what you are about to hear may shake you in ways you never expected. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, was a man who, in a trance-like state, unveiled truths that challenged the most carefully guarded traditions of the Church. His revelations went far beyond predictions about health or glimpses into the future. They delved into the hidden layers of Jesus's life, exposing mysteries that many institutions preferred to leave untouched. And among these revelations lies perhaps the most shocking of all. Jesus was not Mary's only son. Has this ever happened to you? That a single idea suddenly cracks open everything you thought you knew, forcing you to see reality with new eyes? That's exactly what Cayce's words have done for countless seekers who dared to listen. For centuries, the image of Mary as the perpetual virgin, the immaculate and untouchable, mother of a single divine child, has stood as a cornerstone of Christian belief. It shaped theology, art, devotion, and the way generations of believers understood purity and holiness. But Cayce's vision challenged this. He suggested that clinging to the image of Mary as a mother of only one child was not the ultimate proof of her greatness, but rather a way of limiting her humanity, and by extension, limiting our understanding of Christ's mission itself. What you're about to discover might surprise you. Cayce didn't see this revelation as blasphemy, but as an invitation to embrace a deeper truth. Think about it. Why would the Gospels themselves mention the names of James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas as Jesus's brothers? For many, tradition quickly answered. They were cousins, perhaps distant relatives, conveniently explained away to protect a theological construction. Yet Cayce refused to accept that easy answer. To him, denying Mary's role as a mother of several children was a deliberate attempt to build a myth that made Jesus and Mary untouchable, distant, and in many ways, unreachable. Stay with me until the end, because as we unpack this, you'll see how Cayce's revelation does not diminish faith, but actually gives it a new dimension, one that may bring Christ closer to us than ever before. Picture this. Instead of imagining Jesus growing up in an isolated home, Cayce presented a vision of him surrounded by brothers and sisters, sharing the struggles, arguments, laughter, and ordinary experiences of family life. Doesn't that make him feel more real, more human? And isn't it even more powerful to realize that his compassion, patience, and wisdom might have been forged not in sterile perfection, but in the messy, noisy, imperfect environment that mirrors our own lives? Has this ever happened to you, where you realize that the very challenges you once saw as obstacles were in fact shaping your strength and preparing you for something greater? That's exactly how Cayce described Jesus's family life. What we are dealing with here is not just history, it's a spiritual invitation. Cayce believed that understanding Jesus as part of a larger family doesn't rob him of divinity, but magnifies it. It shows that the divine is not some distant, unreachable force, but something that reveals itself in the ordinary rhythms of daily life, in relationships, in misunderstandings, in love, and in forgiveness. And perhaps that is the true miracle, holiness alive, in the heart of an ordinary family. So as we move forward, I want you to keep an open mind. This is not about destroying faith, but about discovering its hidden layers. Cayce believed that the power of Christ was never meant to be confined by rigid dogmas, but to expand into something living, breathing, and deeply human. And now, the question stands before us. If Jesus was not Mary's only son, what does that mean for the story we've always believed? Stay with me, because the journey we're about to take will open doors you may never have dared to approach before. If you enjoy diving into these kinds of revelations and want to keep uncovering hidden truths together, make sure to subscribe. That way, Every new insight and reflection will reach you directly, and you won't miss any part of this journey. Imagine what it truly means when a single detail has the power to shift the entire foundation of a belief system. Edgar Cayce suggested that the revelation of Jesus not being Mary's only son was not a trivial historical note, but a turning point, something that shakes centuries of established tradition. For many, the notion seems threatening, almost impossible to reconcile with the image they've carried since childhood. But what if this hidden truth doesn't weaken faith at all? What if it strengthens it, giving it new depth and fresh meaning? When we dare to look at the story differently, we begin to understand that transformation is often born from discomfort, and that spiritual growth rarely comes from holding on to rigid certainties. Cayce's vision brings Jesus down from the unreachable pedestal of untouchable perfection and places him within a family context, among siblings, arguments, laughter, and everyday decisions. This perspective does not diminish his greatness. It magnifies it, because to live as both divine and human is not to escape the ordinary, but to walk through it fully, carrying a mission that transcends biology and tradition. Isn't it striking to think that Christ's compassion and wisdom may have been sharpened not only in solitary prayer, but in the messy, real-life environment of family life? In this way, the miracle shifts. It is no longer limited to the biological mystery of Mary's virginity, but rather in her transcendent mission as a woman called to embody courage, resilience, and spiritual strength in the middle of ordinary existence. When you consider this, faith stops being a distant doctrine and becomes a living journey. It's no longer about defending an untouchable myth, but about discovering how the divine reveals itself in the simplest moments. Mary's story ceases to be one of mere purity and becomes one of extraordinary perseverance, a mindset that embraced both her divine calling and the very human challenges of motherhood. This is what Cayce was pointing to, a spirituality that is alive, not trapped in dogma, one that adapts, evolves, and grows with us. It's like pulling back the curtain and realizing that the power of Christ's message was never meant to stay locked behind theological walls. It was meant to reach into the raw heart of human experience. Think about the impact of this shift. If Jesus had brothers and sisters, then his early life was filled with the same experiences millions of people know so well, sharing space, learning patience, facing misunderstandings, navigating conflicts, and finding love in the midst of it all. Doesn't that make his teachings about forgiveness and compassion even more powerful? They weren't just abstract lessons. They were lived truths born from the same hidden struggles we each carry behind the scenes of our own lives. It means that divinity itself is not some unreachable state, but something that can coexist with humanity in its most authentic form. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because Cayce's revelation does more than challenge theology. It reshapes the way we perceive the relationship between divine purpose and human reality. It invites us to reflect on the decisions the Church made to maintain its narrative and how those decisions influenced centuries of belief. It also invites us to look inward, at our own mindset, and to see where we may be holding on to rigid structures that prevent us from experiencing a more expansive faith. Could it be that the essence of spirituality lies not in clinging to the perfect image, but in embracing the imperfections that make us real? That's why this hidden truth matters so much. It doesn't just change how we see Jesus, it changes how we see ourselves. If Christ lived surrounded by siblings, facing the push and pull of family life, then he understood the weight of human challenges more intimately than we've been told. His journey was not a distant myth, but a reflection of the same journey we are on, the constant search to transform ordinary experiences into extraordinary expressions of love and light. And this is where I'd love to hear from you. Sometimes writing a simple phrase can help us anchor a new perspective in our hearts. If what we've explored so far resonates with you, write in the comments, "This makes sense to me," or if you feel you're also discovering layers of truth that go beyond tradition, put down, "I'm also on this path." Your words aren't just feedback, they are part of a shared journey of reflection, showing that these revelations are touching lives far beyond the screen. When we allow ourselves to look at Mary through Cayce's perspective, something remarkable happens. She ceases to be only a distant, almost untouchable figure placed on a pedestal, and instead becomes a woman whose life resonates with the struggles and joys of countless mothers across history. This shift may feel subtle at first, but it carries a profound transformation. For centuries, Mary has been portrayed as the immaculate vessel, her purity emphasized above all else. Yet this portrayal stripped away her humanity, her daily decisions, her private journey. Seeing her as a mother who might have cared for more than one child makes her story not smaller, but larger, because it draws her closer to us, to our own human experience. From this angle, a question naturally arises, and it is one that unsettles tradition. Was Christ's true power in being the only Son, the exclusive miracle, or was it in the cosmic mission that transcended biology altogether? The impact of this question reverberates far beyond theology. It asks us to rethink what it means to be chosen, what it means to be part of a divine purpose. Is greatness confined to perfection and exclusivity, or is it revealed in the messy, real-life fabric of family, community, and shared existence? This hidden truth pushes us to reconsider the mindset with which we approach spirituality. It urges us to break free from rigid dogmas that have long defined faith as something fixed and distant, instead embracing it as something dynamic, alive, and interwoven with the ordinary. The Catholic tradition, over the centuries, held firmly to Mary's perpetual virginity as a cornerstone of purity. This image served as a powerful tool. It safeguarded her status, reinforced her sacred uniqueness, and positioned her above the common struggles of life. Behind the scenes, however, this narrative also created distance. A Mary locked into perfection cannot mirror the hearts of those who struggle with motherhood, loss, or daily burdens. She becomes unreachable, leaving believers with a symbol, but not a companion. Yet when we imagine Mary not only as the mother of Jesus, but as a woman navigating the reality of a larger family, we find a far more impactful model of strength. She is no longer the frozen figure of stained glass windows, but a living, breathing presence who embodies both the sacred and the ordinary in perfect union. This change of perspective carries weight. If Mary's role was more human, more grounded in daily choices, then her courage shines brighter than any idealized myth. To accept a mission from God while still embracing the hidden demands of ordinary life is perhaps an even greater miracle than remaining untouchable. It speaks of resilience, of transformation, of a faith that doesn't flee from reality, but enters it fully. And this realization forces us to ask ourselves, how often do we mistake perfection for holiness? How often do we believe that to be part of something divine, we must first escape the human? Casey's revelations invite us to turn this assumption upside down. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because the question of exclusivity versus mission is not just theological, it is symbolic of how humanity defines value. To elevate Mary only by her virginity is to reduce her mission to biology, as if her greatness existed in what she avoided, rather than in the choices she embraced. To see her instead as a woman who bore children, loved them, guided them, and still stood as the mother of Christ, is to witness holiness lived in the ordinary. And it is here that faith gains new power, when the sacred is no longer distant but close, woven into the lives of those who believe. This hidden truth challenges us to shift our mindset. It asks us to see that divinity can emerge not only in exclusivity, but in the shared journey of human experience. It suggests that Mary's real strength was not in being separate from humanity, but in representing it fully, embodying the courage of a woman who accepted a cosmic mission while still navigating the daily impact of being a mother. That is not a story of distance. It is a story of closeness, of relatability, of transformation. I'd love to know how this resonates with you. Sometimes writing something down helps us anchor it within ourselves, turning reflection into action. So if this perspective speaks to you, write in the comments, "Mary feels closer to me." By putting it into words, you affirm the hidden truth that holiness does not live far away. It lives here, in the real, in the human, in the journey we share. When the Gospels themselves mention names like James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas as the brothers of Jesus, A tension emerges that cannot be ignored. It is as if a hidden thread lies woven into the sacred narrative, waiting for someone brave enough to pull it and see what unravels. For most of history, tradition quickly sewed that thread back in place, offering explanations that kept the image of Mary pristine and untouched. Those figures were cousins, distant relatives, anything but children of the same mother. But Edgar Cayce refused to smooth over the contradiction. He saw in it a powerful hidden truth, one that exposed how narratives can be shaped, adjusted, and guarded to preserve a certain image of holiness. Behind the scenes of theology, decisions were made not only to inspire faith but also to protect authority, and Cayce challenged those choices directly. According to him, the denial of Mary's other children was less about historical fact and more about constructing a myth that placed Mary and Jesus on pedestals so high that no ordinary believer could truly identify with them. This myth transformed them into untouchable figures, locked in perfection, distant from the daily struggles of real human life. And yet, what if the opposite were true? What if Mary's greatness, and by extension Jesus's humanity, shone brighter precisely because they were immersed in the common struggles of family life? Doesn't it make Mary stronger, not weaker, to imagine her caring for more than one child, balancing the weight of a divine mission with the everyday challenges of motherhood? This perspective changes everything. If Mary navigated sleepless nights, sibling arguments, household responsibilities, and the emotional turbulence of raising a family, then her story becomes far more powerful. It is no longer about protecting an abstract purity, but about living faith through resilience and courage. It reveals a woman who was not just chosen for her immaculate state, but for her ability to embody devotion while fully immersed in human experience. And it reframes Jesus as well, because a child who grew up surrounded by siblings would have learned patience, tolerance, and compassion, not from distant ideals, but from lived reality. His message of love and forgiveness would not have been crafted in isolation, but in the furnace of ordinary life, where conflicts and reconciliation walk hand in hand. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the implications of this hidden truth go beyond theological debate. They touch on transformation, the transformation of how we perceive the divine, how we perceive ourselves, and how we define greatness. When the Church chose to maintain the myth of exclusivity, it reinforced the idea that divinity could only exist far away from human flaws. But Cayce's vision suggests something radically different, that the sacred reveals itself most vividly in the middle of imperfection. Mary's humanity does not detract from her role. It magnifies it. Her decisions, her sacrifices, her perseverance, these become the true signs of her strength. The impact of this shift is enormous. It calls us to re-examine the mindset with which we've been taught to approach spirituality. Instead of worshiping an image so polished that it feels unattainable, we begin to recognize that holiness can grow in the same soil as our everyday struggles. The ordinary becomes extraordinary when seen through this lens. And isn't that the most revolutionary part of Cayce's revelation? That divinity is not locked away in distant perfection, but emerges right here, in the raw and often messy journey of life. This idea has the power to change the way we see not only Mary and Jesus, but also ourselves. If Mary could live her divine mission while raising a family, then perhaps our own challenges, far from disqualifying us, are the very places where faith and strength are forged. And if Jesus learned love and forgiveness in the context of family tensions, then our own homes, with their imperfections and trials, may also be the training ground for spiritual growth. It's not an easy thought to accept, because it strips away the comfort of certainty and pushes us to engage with faith on a deeper, more vulnerable level. Yet that is precisely why it resonates so strongly. It meets us where we are. This hidden truth does not diminish the sacred. It draws it closer, making it a part of our journey, not just a distant ideal to be admired from afar. I'd love to know how this strikes you personally. Sometimes writing it out helps solidify what we feel inside. So if this perspective touches something in you, write in the comments. The ordinary can be sacred. By putting those words down, You acknowledge that transformation begins not in perfection, but in the honest embrace of life as it is. For Casey, the essence of holiness was never about escaping life, but embracing it fully. He believed that Mary's greatness did not stem from an otherworldly detachment from her own womanhood, but from the courage to live it completely, with all its challenges and joys. In this light, the sacred is no longer confined to the extraordinary event of a virgin birth. It becomes present in the everyday rhythm of nurturing, protecting, and guiding children. And when we look at Mary through this lens, she ceases to be a distant icon locked in marble or stained glass. Instead, she becomes a figure of transformation, someone who embodies the resilience of ordinary humanity while carrying a divine mission that forever altered the course of history. Edgar Casey took this even further by suggesting that the story of Jesus' siblings might hold a deeper spiritual meaning than most are willing to admit. In his view, they were not simply brothers in the biological sense, but companions in a cosmic alliance, souls that had walked together in other times and returned in this pivotal moment, to weave a shared destiny. This idea shifts the narrative from a single miraculous birth to a broader plan of spiritual cooperation, a hidden truth that reveals how humanity's greatest figures may often be surrounded by others who play equally vital roles behind the scenes. Imagine how different our perspective becomes when we stop seeing Jesus in isolation and instead picture him as part of a family, not just of blood, but of mission. This concept of a spiritual alliance carries enormous impact. If those closest to him were part of a greater divine plan, then Jesus' journey was not a solitary one, but a shared movement of transformation. Each soul would have carried its own weight, its own decisions, its own struggles, and yet together they formed a web of destiny, designed to bring light into a world that desperately needed it. This way of seeing changes the mindset with which we approach history itself. Instead of focusing solely on one extraordinary figure, we begin to notice the collective force that shapes spiritual revolutions. Holiness becomes less about exclusivity and more about connection, about how lives intertwine for a purpose larger than any single individual. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because when we allow ourselves to view Jesus' siblings through Casey's perspective, we uncover more than a historical detail. We discover a profound metaphor about the human journey. Just as his brothers and sisters may have symbolized reincarnated souls walking alongside him, each of us is surrounded by people who share our path in ways we don't always recognize. Relationships, whether filled with harmony or conflict, can be part of a greater design shaping our growth. The hidden truth is that transformation rarely happens alone. It unfolds in the impact others have on us, in the daily lessons of patience, forgiveness, and love that only emerge in the context of community. Casey's vision challenges the idea of divinity as isolated perfection. Instead, it reveals a Christ who lived among a circle of souls, some who supported him, others who misunderstood him, but all of whom played their role in the unfolding of a divine mission. Doesn't that make his compassion even more powerful? To teach forgiveness while experiencing misunderstanding at home, to speak of love while enduring the tensions of family life. This is the kind of authenticity that gives his message timeless weight. And it makes us wonder, could it be that our own families, with all their complexities, are also spiritual alliances designed to refine us, to teach us, to prepare us for something larger than we can see? This way of thinking reshapes not only the story of Mary and Jesus, but also our own personal narratives. It invites us to see that the people in our lives, even those who challenge us, may be part of a shared mission we cannot yet fully grasp. Behind the scenes of our struggles, there may be a greater plan unfolding, one that connects us to a collective purpose beyond the limits of individuality. Accepting this possibility requires a mindset shift, but once we embrace it, even the most ordinary relationships can take on extraordinary significance. And here's where I'd love to hear from you. Sometimes the act of writing helps turn reflection into clarity. So if this idea resonates with you, write in the comments. We are connected in this journey. By putting those words down, you acknowledge that transformation often comes through the bonds we share, and that even the most hidden alliances may hold a divine purpose. There is something profoundly moving in the idea that even within his own home, Jesus faced moments of misunderstanding, resistance, and doubt. His brothers, like so many of those around him, could not always grasp the weight of the mission he carried. And isn't that a reflection of life itself? Often, the people closest to us are the very ones who struggle to see the path we're on, questioning our choices or dismissing our vision. For Jesus, this human tension became part of the burden of his divine mission, reminding us that greatness rarely unfolds without opposition. It shows us that the journey of transformation is never a straight line. It is a path marked by friction, resilience, and decisions that demand courage, even in the face of those we love. What makes this even more powerful is how these moments shaped his character. Living among siblings wasn't just about sharing meals or household chores. It was a school of the spirit, a daily training ground in patience, tolerance, and forgiveness. Every misunderstanding and every conflict offered him the opportunity to practice the very principles he would later teach to the world. Imagine the impact of learning compassion not in isolation, but in the real-life chaos of family dynamics. It is in that hidden truth, behind the scenes of his divine calling, that we see the depth of his humanity. His message of love wasn't a lofty abstraction. It was forged in the ordinary rhythm of human relationships. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Casey described Jesus' life as part of a vast cosmic web, a mission that was both human and divine, carefully interwoven into a larger plan. This idea changes everything. It reminds us that no life exists in isolation, and no journey is truly separate from the greater whole. Every encounter, every challenge, every bond carries meaning within a network that extends far beyond what we can see. When we think of Jesus this way, we begin to recognize that his struggles within his own family weren't accidental. They were threads in a larger tapestry, essential parts of a divine narrative that had to be lived in order to fulfill its purpose. The mindset this perspective inspires is one of connection. We start to notice how our own lives, with their difficulties and contradictions, might also be woven into something larger. That argument with a loved one, the decision that feels misunderstood, the challenge that weighs on us. What if all of these are part of a greater design preparing us for something beyond our comprehension? Casey's revelation is not only about reimagining Jesus, it is also about reimagining ourselves. It pushes us to consider that the pain of being misunderstood may actually be a catalyst for growth, that the friction of relationships can refine us into the people we are meant to become. When we see Jesus through this lens, the impact is profound. His story is no longer distant, wrapped only in divinity. It becomes relatable, grounded, and deeply human. The divine mission did not erase the weight of family tensions, it included them. His ability to extend unconditional love was not simply gifted to him, it was practiced, tested, and proven in the ordinary challenges of daily life. This is the hidden truth Casey wanted us to grasp. Holiness is not detached from humanity but born out of it, strengthened by it, and revealed through it. And if that is true, then perhaps our own struggles carry a hidden dimension as well. Perhaps the misunderstandings we face, the resistance we encounter, are not signs that we are on the wrong path but confirmations that we are being shaped for a higher purpose. Transformation often comes disguised as conflict, and the most profound lessons arrive through the very experiences we wish to avoid. So let me ask you, does this perspective help you see your own journey differently? Sometimes, acknowledging it aloud can anchor the realization more deeply. If it resonates with you, write in the comments, "My struggles have meaning." By doing so, you affirm that the tensions of life are not empty obstacles, but part of a larger web guiding you toward growth, just as they did for Jesus. When we look closely at how the Church chose to reinterpret or even silence the references to Jesus' brothers, it becomes clear that these decisions were not random. They were deliberate, carefully shaped, to protect Mary's image and preserve a certain vision of faith that relied on her being untouchable. This was not just theology. It was also about maintaining unity, authority, and control. And yet, in making these choices, something vital was lost. The hidden truth is that by stripping away the more human aspects of the story, they also stripped away the parts that could have brought believers closer to Mary and to Christ in the most intimate way possible. For Edgar Cayce, this wasn't a harmless reinterpretation, but a direct manipulation of truth. He argued that by removing the idea of Jesus growing up with siblings, the Church crafted a narrative that seemed perfect on the surface, but lacked the texture of reality. It made Christ's life feel almost unreachable, as though he had lived in a world untouched by the struggles that define the human journey. This choice may have given the faithful an ideal to admire, but it also created distance, a gulf between divine figures and ordinary people. Instead of an inspiring mirror, Mary became a flawless statue. Instead of a mother who faced real joys and pains, she was reduced to an abstract symbol. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the implications of this distortion are far greater than a historical disagreement. It is about how narratives shape the way people think, believe, and live. Imagine the impact of growing up believing that holiness could only be achieved by being flawless, detached, and entirely separate from human struggle. That mindset doesn't invite transformation. It traps people in feelings of inadequacy. By hiding Mary's humanity, the Church unintentionally hid a powerful example of strength, a woman who carried divine responsibility while also living the ordinary challenges of family life. That example could have empowered countless believers, showing them that their daily decisions, their perseverance, and even their mistakes were not barriers to faith, but opportunities to live it more fully. This manipulation also raises questions about the behind-the-scenes choices institutions make and how those decisions affect generations. What else may have been softened, altered, or ignored to maintain a certain narrative? Cayce invites us to confront these hidden truths, not to destroy faith but to make it stronger. By embracing the fullness of Mary's humanity, we discover a model of courage and resilience that speaks directly to our own lives. A Mary who knew sleepless nights, family arguments, and the bittersweet balance of love and responsibility is a Mary we can relate to, one who stands with us rather than above us. And this brings us back to Christ. If his life was presented without those human layers, then we risk losing the most profound lesson. That divinity is not about being shielded from pain or conflict, but about moving through it with love. The impact of this realization is enormous, because it changes how we see our own struggles. Instead of feeling that imperfection distances us from the sacred, we begin to understand that it is in those very imperfections that holiness can take root. This is the transformation Cayce wanted us to recognize, the shift from worshiping untouchable myths to living a faith that breathes, adapts, and meets us exactly where we are. Mary's reduction to an abstract symbol may have preserved unity, but it also robbed believers of intimacy. And isn't intimacy what we crave most in our relationship with the divine? A sense that God is not far away but close, woven into our journey, walking with us in the middle of our challenges? Restoring that intimacy requires courage, the courage to question, to reframe, and to embrace the possibility that the truth is more complex but also more meaningful than the simplified version we were given. I'd love to hear how this sits with you. Sometimes articulating a thought helps anchor it more deeply within us. If this perspective resonates with you, write in the comments, "Truth makes faith stronger." By putting it into words, you affirm that discovering hidden layers of the story doesn't weaken belief. It deepens it, creating a faith that is both resilient and real. Cayce's insight that Christ's true power was expressed through his humanity turns the entire narrative upside down. Instead of imagining a figure isolated from daily life, untouched by the weight of family responsibilities or tensions, we begin to see him in the middle of it all, sharing meals, listening to disagreements, navigating the small frictions that shape character. His greatness was not the result of being kept apart from human reality, but of fully engaging with it. To live among siblings, to face resistance and misunderstandings at home and still embody patience and compassion is what gave depth to his mission. It was this immersion in real life that made his message credible, powerful, and transformative. And doesn't that realization shift our mindset? It reminds us The true strength doesn't come from distance, but from the courage to remain present in the very challenges that test us. The silence of tradition, however, worked against this perspective. By hiding uncomfortable truths and reshaping narratives, institutions crafted an image that was easier to preserve but less authentic. It was a strategy of control, an effort to protect authority by removing the parts of the story that seemed too human, too messy, too close to the struggles of ordinary believers. But the hidden truth is that those very struggles hold the key to transformation. By softening or erasing them, the Church created a faith that seemed pristine on the outside, but lacked the impact of lived experience. Behind the scenes of theology, decisions were made to maintain order, yet in doing so, the most relatable aspects of Mary and Jesus were placed out of reach. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because when we bring those human details back into the story, something profound happens. Picture Mary not only as the serene figure of paintings, but as a woman dealing with household chores, sibling rivalries, and the ordinary chaos of family life. Suddenly, she is no longer a distant icon. She becomes a reflection of mothers everywhere who juggle responsibilities, who carry the weight of love and exhaustion, who find strength not in perfection, but in persistence. This image doesn't diminish her. It elevates her. It shows that holiness shines brightest, not when it denies humanity, but when it embraces it. This shift has an enormous impact on how we approach our own journey. If Mary's life included sleepless nights, quarrels among children, and the unglamorous details of daily survival, then our own struggles are not so far from the sacred. Transformation doesn't require leaving ordinary life behind. It requires learning to see the extraordinary within it. And if Christ grew up in the midst of sibling quarrels and misunderstandings, then the virtues he preached, love, forgiveness, compassion, were not just divine ideals but practices he lived out daily in the context of family life. Doesn't that make his words feel more real, more attainable, more connected to us? The hidden truth here is that authenticity makes faith stronger. Stories polished to perfection may inspire admiration, but they rarely inspire transformation. What touches us deeply are the revelations that mirror our own experiences, the arguments, the doubts, the resilience, the decisions that shape who we become. By recognizing that even Mary and Jesus walked through these very things, we see faith not as an escape from reality, but as a way of navigating it with courage and meaning. And that is why returning to these silenced details is so important. They are not minor footnotes. They are the heartbeat of the story. They reveal that divinity is not incompatible with humanity, but revealed through it. They invite us to approach our own lives differently, to see the sacred hidden in our ordinary days, to understand that our imperfections are not barriers but pathways to growth. I'd love to hear how this perspective resonates with you. Sometimes when we put thoughts into words, they anchor more firmly in our hearts. If this vision of Mary and Jesus as closer, more human figures speaks to you, write in the comments, "Humanity is sacred." By doing so, you affirm that the struggles and imperfections of life are not obstacles to the divine. They are the very ground where the sacred reveals itself. Mary's greatness, when seen through this lens, was not only in the divine mystery surrounding her, but also in the courage of her lived reality. Raising Jesus while also caring for other children places her in the realm of mothers who embody resilience day after day. She was not simply a vessel chosen for purity. She was a woman who had to make countless decisions, navigate sleepless nights, and hold together a family with both tenderness and strength. This hidden truth elevates her story because it shows that the sacred is not divorced from human experience. It is interwoven with it. Her life becomes a reminder that holiness can dwell in resilience, in the persistence of love, when life feels overwhelming. When we view her this way, Mary transforms into a symbol that resonates far beyond doctrine. She represents every mother balancing the sacred with the daily grind, every parent who carries the weight of responsibility while nurturing hope and faith. Her example becomes relatable, grounded, and immensely powerful, because it mirrors the journey of millions of lives where sacred purpose and human struggle exist side by side. This perspective shifts our mindset. It tells us that divinity is not reserved for perfection, but can be revealed in the raw, unpolished moments of ordinary life. And isn't that what gives Mary's story the power to inspire us still? Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because accepting the idea that Jesus grew up with siblings does more than expand Mary's humanity. It reshapes the way we understand Jesus himself. A noisy household filled with rivalry, laughter, misunderstandings, and reconciliation becomes the environment that shaped him. It was there, within the walls of a home buzzing with imperfection, that he learned patience, compassion, and forgiveness. These were not abstract virtues handed down fully formed. They were cultivated in daily encounters with brothers and sisters who did not always understand him. This hidden truth reveals that his wisdom was not detached from reality, but forged in the same kinds of struggles that shape us all. Think about the impact this has on how we perceive his message. If Jesus grew up in the same chaos, arguments, and shared moments of joy that we know in our own families, then his teachings take on a new level of authenticity. His call to forgive 70 times 7 does not come from an unreachable divine height. It comes from someone who had to forgive often, in real and personal ways. His compassion for those who were misunderstood or rejected was born from his own experience of being questioned within his own household. Behind the scenes of his divinity lies a deeply human journey, one that makes his mission even more remarkable. This perspective invites us to examine our own lives differently. How many times do we overlook the value of the lessons hidden in our most ordinary conflicts? How often do we dismiss the impact of daily challenges, believing they are distractions from a greater purpose, when in reality they may be shaping us for it? The story of Jesus' youth within a family context reminds us that transformation doesn't begin in grand moments. It begins in the ordinary, in the small decisions to love, to forgive, to persist. This is where the sacred reveals itself, not by avoiding imperfection, but by moving through it with grace. Mary, then, is not only a mother in the abstract sense, but a guide for all of us. She shows that to carry the sacred while balancing the ordinary is not only possible, but profoundly meaningful. And Jesus' youth among siblings shows that holiness is not formed in isolation, but in the midst of daily life, where love and patience are constantly tested. Together, their stories remind us that the divine and the human are not separate. They are woven into the same journey. I'd love to know how this perspective lands with you. Sometimes, putting a thought into words helps it settle more deeply in our hearts. If this way of seeing Mary and Jesus resonates with you, write in the comments, "The sacred lives in the ordinary." By doing so, you affirm that the struggles, joys, and imperfections of daily life are not obstacles to divinity, but the very place where it reveals itself most powerfully. The disbelief of his brothers created a wound that was not small, and yet it became a vital part of the path he had to walk. To feel rejection at home, in the very place where one expects to be understood and embraced, is a weight that shapes the soul. For Jesus, those moments of misunderstanding were not barriers to his mission, but preparation for the much greater resistance he would face in the world outside. When leaders dismissed him, when crowds turned against him, he already knew the sting of disbelief. This hidden truth reveals the depth of his resilience, because his ability to continue with courage and love was not born in comfort, but in the experience of being doubted by those closest to him. That kind of pain could have broken him, yet it refined him, strengthening his resolve to carry a message larger than himself. In this sense, family life became his first spiritual school. Every argument, every disappointment, every decision to respond with patience instead of anger, became lessons that shaped his teachings on love and forgiveness. Isn't it striking to think that the principles that would one day shake the world, turning the other cheek, forgiving endlessly, loving even those who reject you, were first practiced in the intimate space of his own household? This shows that his wisdom was not abstract. It was lived, tested, and embodied in the daily rhythm of family relationships. The mindset this invites us to embrace is powerful, that our own struggles and conflicts might also be the training grounds for the virtues we are called to live out in larger arenas. Transformation begins at home, In the hidden battles no one else sees. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because when we recognize Jesus' siblings as part of this process, they stop being minor characters on the margins of history and instead become essential figures who reinforced his humanity. Their presence showed that his divinity did not require isolation from ordinary life. It manifested within it. The sacred was not a shield protecting him from human limitation. It was revealed through the very experience of navigating those limitations. This perspective carries a profound impact because it tells us that the divine is not distant from the ordinary, but alive within it. The hidden truth is that holiness does not float above human reality. It emerges in the middle of it. This is what makes Casey's vision so striking. By emphasizing the humanity of Jesus through his family life, he showed that greatness is not about avoiding challenges, but about the decisions made within them, the struggles with siblings, the pain of rejection, the choice to keep loving despite misunderstanding. These were not distractions from his mission but the very soil in which it grew, and when we see it this way, we begin to understand our own lives differently. The conflicts we face, the relationships that test us, the moments of feeling unseen or unheard, perhaps they too are part of a larger preparation, shaping us for purposes we may not yet fully grasp. This reframing transforms how we view both divinity and humanity. It dissolves the false division between sacred and ordinary, reminding us that the two are inseparably connected. Jesus' divinity was not diminished by his family struggles. It was revealed through them. His teachings on forgiveness carry weight because they were not just spoken but lived. His compassion resonates because it was practiced in the very environment where love is both most expected and most tested. And his courage to continue despite disbelief reflects the resilience of one who understood rejection intimately. What this leaves us with is an invitation to see our own households, with all their noise, flaws, and imperfections, as places where transformation is possible, to view the challenges we endure not as obstacles, but as opportunities to cultivate patience, compassion, and love. It is a perspective that changes the way we carry our own journeys, making us aware that the divine may already be working behind the scenes of our most ordinary struggles. I'd love to know how this thought resonates with you. Sometimes a single phrase can anchor the realization more firmly in our hearts. If this perspective feels meaningful to you, write in the comments, "My home is my first school." By putting those words down, you affirm that even the hidden trials of daily life can prepare the soul for something far greater. The decision of church leaders to silence the details about Jesus' siblings was not simply an act of theological refinement, but a choice that prioritized the preservation of doctrine over the authenticity of lived truth. By protecting Mary's perpetual virginity at all costs, they shaped a version of faith that appeared flawless but lacked the texture of reality. This move was strategic, ensuring cohesion within the community and avoiding uncomfortable questions that could weaken the authority of tradition. Yet in doing so, something invaluable was lost: the chance to present a Christ whose greatness shone not only in miracles and divine revelations but also in the human struggles of family life. Casey stepped into this silence and exposed it for what it was: an intentional manipulation of narrative meant to guard authority and maintain control. He insisted that true faith cannot grow stronger by hiding what is uncomfortable. On the contrary, it matures only when it has the courage to face hidden truths, no matter how unsettling they may appear at first. His approach was not to destroy belief, but to enrich it, to peel back the layers of myth and reveal the human journey beneath. For Casey, the transformation of faith required transparency, because only when believers encounter the full reality, both divine and human, can they truly grasp the depth of the message. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the missed opportunity here is more profound than many realize. By choosing to emphasize myth over humanity, the Church stripped away the very elements that could have made Jesus' story most relatable. Imagine the impact of teaching generations of believers that Christ's greatness was not limited to miraculous acts, but revealed in the way he navigated ordinary family dynamics. The disagreements, the misunderstandings, the decisions that required patience and forgiveness. Such an image could have empowered people to see their own homes as sacred spaces of growth, showing them that divinity can manifest in the same struggles they face every day. Instead, by polishing the story into perfection, the Church created distance. Mary became a distant icon, admired but unreachable, and Jesus became a figure so divine that his humanity seemed almost irrelevant. This version of the narrative may have inspired awe, but it denied believers the comfort of identification. The hidden truth here is that what makes a story transformative is not its untouchable perfection, but its resonance with real experience. And when we remove the human aspects, we weaken that resonance. The impact of this decision shaped centuries of spirituality, reinforcing the idea that the sacred belongs in lofty, unreachable spaces rather than within the everyday journey of life. Casey's revelations confront us with the uncomfortable possibility that much of what we accept as tradition may have been shaped not only by devotion, but also by decisions made behind the scenes to protect authority. This realization invites a shift in mindset. It challenges us to ask, what does faith look like when it is stripped of its myths? Can it still inspire transformation when we see Christ not as an untouchable figure, but as someone who lived within the same imperfections we know so well? For Casey, the answer was clear. A faith that embraces truth, even when it disrupts tradition, is a faith that grows stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more liberating. What makes this so compelling is the way it reframes holiness. If Jesus' family life had been highlighted rather than hidden, believers could see that holiness does not require separation from human flaws. Instead, it thrives in the middle of them. The ordinary decisions of daily life, whether to forgive, whether to love, whether to persist, become the very ground where the sacred reveals itself. By missing the chance to emphasize this, the Church held back a vision of spirituality that could have empowered people to see their own humanity as worthy of divine purpose. And yet, even as this truth was silenced for centuries, it still emerges through revelations, through deeper readings, and through perspectives like Casey's that refuse to accept a polished myth as the whole story. It is a reminder that truth has a way of finding its voice, even when buried under layers of dogma. And when it does, it changes everything. It transforms how we see history, how we see divinity, and how we see ourselves. I'd love to know how this strikes you personally. Sometimes a single phrase helps crystallize what we feel inside. If this perspective resonates with you, write in the comments, "Truth makes faith real." By putting those words down, you affirm that uncovering hidden truths does not weaken belief. It gives it the depth and strength it was always meant to carry. For Casey, the beauty of Christ's life was in this profound coexistence. Divinity and humanity intertwined, never in conflict, always complementing one another. Jesus was not only the cosmic Christ, carrying within him the essence of the divine source, but also an ordinary man who walked through the same trials, emotions, and limitations we all know. This duality does not diminish him. It magnifies him. It shows that the divine was not sent to hover above humanity, but to live within it, to reveal that holiness is not about escaping reality, but about transforming it from the inside. When we picture Jesus with siblings, suddenly his story feels more immediate, more alive. It strips away the distance created by centuries of myth and allows us to see a figure who understood the daily rhythm of human struggle. He was not preaching forgiveness from a throne, detached and untouchable. He was speaking from lived experience, from the pain of rejection, from the patience practiced in noisy, imperfect family life. That hidden truth makes his teachings more powerful because they are rooted in authenticity, and authenticity has an impact that polished ideals can never achieve. It resonates with the heart because it reflects what we ourselves face. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because the balance between the divine and the human is not only the essence of Jesus' story, it is the key to understanding why his message continues to transform lives. If his divinity alone were emphasized, his life would feel unattainable, something to admire but never to follow. If only his humanity were highlighted, His story might inspire but lack the cosmic weight that transcends time and space. But when the two meet, when heaven and earth converge in one life, we discover a truth that can reshape our entire mindset. The sacred is not distant. It is woven into the everyday challenges of being human. Think about the impact of this realization. If holiness is lived in daily struggles, then every act of patience, every decision to love despite misunderstanding, every choice to forgive when it would be easier to turn away, becomes part of the sacred journey. This is where transformation truly begins, not in the absence of conflict but in the way we respond to it. Jesus' life becomes a mirror, showing us that divinity does not erase humanity, but deepens it, giving it new purpose and meaning. His cosmic mission was not to remove us from the world but to show us how to live in it, with light, courage, and compassion. Behind the scenes of this dual identity lies the most revolutionary truth Casey emphasized, that holiness is not a remote state, reserved for the few, but a possibility alive in every moment of ordinary existence. The struggle of family life, the tensions of relationships, the doubts that arise in the quiet of the heart, all of these are not obstacles to spiritual growth, but invitations to it. They are the very places where the divine reveals itself. Seeing Jesus this way does not make him smaller. It makes him closer, more relatable, and therefore far more transformative. This balance also redefines how we view faith itself. It is no longer about striving for impossible perfection or detaching ourselves from reality. It becomes about integration, about holding together the sacred and the human as two sides of the same coin. Faith matures when it accepts that life's imperfections are not evidence of failure, but proof of participation in the journey. Jesus lived this balance fully, and his message carries power because it speaks to both our earthly condition and our eternal potential. The more we open ourselves to this perspective, the more we begin to see our own lives differently. The hidden truth is that we too live at the intersection of the human and the divine. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to embody compassion, every moment of doubt an invitation to trust more deeply, every ordinary task a chance to reveal something extraordinary. That is the mindset shift Casey wanted us to embrace. Holiness does not separate us from the world. It roots us in it, showing that the divine shines most brightly when expressed through our humanity. I'd love to know how this resonates with you, personally. Sometimes writing it out gives the reflection a deeper hold on us. If this perspective speaks to you, write in the comments, "The divine lives in me too." By putting those words down, you affirm that just as Jesus revealed divinity through ordinary life, you also carry within you the possibility of revealing light through your own journey. Casey's vision magnifies Jesus in a way that tradition often avoids, by showing a Christ who unites heaven and earth, who carries the divine light, while walking shoulder to shoulder with brothers and navigating the very struggles of ordinary life. This image is powerful because it strips away the idea of holiness as something distant and untouchable, and instead reveals a sacred presence that breathes within the human experience. To picture Jesus in the noise of a household, in the midst of laughter, conflict, and shared burdens, is to recognize that divinity does not escape humanity, but embraces it fully. And isn't that what makes his story resonate across centuries? Not because he floated above reality, but because he transformed it from within. This revelation, however, was never neutral. For some it felt like liberation, an opening to see faith as alive, dynamic, and deeply human. For others, it appeared as nothing less than heresy, a threat to centuries of tradition carefully built to protect a pristine image of the Holy Family. And it is here that the true weight of Casey's words becomes evident. They did not merely add an interesting detail to history. They provoked a storm, shaking the foundations of belief and exposing the fragile balance between protecting authority and embracing hidden truths. The impact was so profound because it touched the most sacred of symbols: Mary, Jesus, and the very structure of Christian identity. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the debate around this revelation is not only theological, it is emotional. For many, doctrines are not just ideas written on parchment. They are the anchors of identity, the structures that give meaning to existence. To suggest that Mary was more human than tradition allowed is to challenge the comfort of certainty. It raises fears of losing the foundation upon which generations have built their lives. Yet for others, this same truth is freeing. It tears down the wall between the sacred and the human, showing that holiness is not unreachable. It brings Christ closer, not as an untouchable myth, but as a companion who knows the struggles of family life, rejection, and misunderstanding. This duality, fear on one side and freedom on the other, reveals something profound about the human condition. We often cling to the security of established narratives, even when they no longer inspire transformation. Change threatens stability, and yet, without change, faith risks becoming rigid, more about preservation than growth. Casey's revelation forced people to confront this hidden truth, that growth always carries discomfort. Transformation requires letting go of illusions, even those that once gave comfort, in order to embrace something deeper and more real. The very controversy his vision provoked is proof of its impact. It compelled people to wrestle with the essence of what they believe and why. Behind the scenes of this debate lies a universal journey. It is not just about religion, but about how humans face truth in every area of life. Do we cling to myths because they are safe, or do we dare to face revelations that might unsettle us but also set us free? This tension is the heart of Casey's challenge, and it echoes far beyond theology into the mindset we carry in our own decisions. When we encounter a truth that disrupts our assumptions, we stand at a crossroads, retreat into denial, or walk forward into transformation. The story of Jesus, as both divine and human, invites us into the second path. It asks us to risk the discomfort of change for the reward of deeper connection. By accepting that he walked in the same dust as his brothers, felt the sting of rejection, and lived the complexity of family life, we discover a Christ who is not less holy, but infinitely more relatable. His divinity does not exclude humanity, it illuminates it. And his message does not ask us to escape reality but to bring light into it. I wonder how this tension feels to you. For some, it may stir resistance. For others, relief. But often, putting our response into words helps us process it more deeply. So if this reflection resonates, write in the comments, "Truth sets me free." By doing so, you affirm that even when revelations challenge tradition, they hold the power to expand faith and strengthen the journey. Casey's legacy lies in the courage to peel back the layers of tradition and look beyond dogma, even when doing so feels uncomfortable or destabilizing. His vision was never about tearing faith apart, but about making it more alive, more relevant, more human. He presented a Christ who did not come to hover above daily life, but to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. A Christ who found holiness not in isolation, but in the very fabric of human existence. Meals shared, arguments endured, forgiveness practiced, and love chosen again and again, even when it wasn't easy. This perspective is unsettling precisely because it strips away the perfection of myth and replaces it with something much closer, something that touches our own lived experiences. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic because the question Casey leaves us with is not just theological, it is personal, intimate, and transformative. Are we ready to accept a more human Jesus? That question is not simply about revising history, it is about revising the way we approach spirituality itself. A Christ who knew the tension of family, who lived in a noisy house, who felt rejection and still responded with love. Such a Christ invites us to believe that our own struggles are not disqualifications from the sacred but opportunities for it. The hidden truth is that by embracing his humanity, we discover the full depth of his divinity, and in turn, the divine potential within ourselves. This is where the impact of Casey's revelation becomes undeniable. If we say yes to a more human Jesus, we are also saying yes to a spirituality that lives in the present moment, not only in rituals or distant ideals. It is a mindset shift that changes everything. Holiness is not confined to sanctuaries or ancient texts. It breathes in every act of compassion, in every decision to forgive, in every moment when love triumphs over anger. It is no longer about chasing a perfect image of faith, but about embracing the imperfect spaces of life as the very ground where transformation unfolds. Behind the scenes of history, institutions chose to highlight only one side of Jesus, the untouchable divine figure who seemed beyond reach. But Casey's courage was in insisting that the full story matters: the laughter, the conflicts, the misunderstandings, and the resilience within them. And isn't that what makes the story powerful? Not that he avoided the struggles we face, but that he lived them and still carried divine light through them. This hidden truth pulls the sacred out of abstraction and places it into the real world, where we actually live. Accepting this kind of Jesus is not without cost. It asks us to let go of the comfort of certainty and step into a faith that requires participation, responsibility, and vulnerability. It challenges us to see our own lives as reflections of the same sacred pattern, where ordinary trials are the soil of extraordinary growth. But it also offers something priceless: freedom. The freedom to stop pretending that perfection is required. The freedom to recognize that divinity meets us exactly where we are, in the middle of our messy and imperfect journeys. The journey of faith, seen through Casey's lens, is not about escaping the human condition, but about embracing it with new eyes. It is about discovering the divine hidden in the very places we once thought were too broken, too small, or too ordinary to matter. That is the invitation in the question. Are we ready to accept a more human Jesus? Because if we are, then faith stops being a distant idea and becomes a lived reality, one that changes how we see ourselves, others, and the world around us. I'd love to know how this question resonates with you. Sometimes, giving form to a thought by writing it down can open new doors within us. If this reflection speaks to you, write in the comments, "I accept the human and the divine." By doing so, you acknowledge that faith becomes most powerful when it embraces both sides of the story, the extraordinary light of heaven and the ordinary struggles of earth. If you made it all the way here, it means this reflection touched something inside you, and that already tells me this space we're building together has meaning. So if you want to keep walking through these kinds of revelations with me, go ahead and subscribe. That way, every new chapter of this journey finds its way straight to you. And if you felt connected to the message, leave a simple comment saying, "I'm with you until the end," or "This message was meant for me." It's always powerful to see how these words land in the hearts of those listening. And of course, a like is more than just a click. It's a quiet way of saying this conversation mattered to you. It helps keep this dialogue alive and growing. Now don't stop here. There's a video right here that beautifully complements what we've just explored. Click and continue with me over there.